Hello, lads and lasses of the Pipe Smokers of Ireland. This is Pipepastor once again coming to you in his residence post on Monday. And good to be with you again. It's a great day out here today, actually chilly. It'll probably get up to around a whopping 70 degrees, which in California we start putting on sweaters and jackets and such. Um, but in any case, it's good to be with you again, and great comments by everybody, and I appreciate all the things that you guys have to say, all the encouragement, both from our august community and from also the YouTube uh, uh, channel that I have under Pipepastor. Today we're kind of approaching a discussion on Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And really only dealing with the first 3 verses, but to get there we have to backtrack to something that old wise Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and basically starting there about 16. So I'm going to recap and read it to you. Out of Ecclesiastes 3, starting with the 16th verse, we'll go all the way to verse 3, chapter 4. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. And I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity and a time to judge every deed. And I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward, and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will come after them? Then in chapter 4, verse 1 through 3, again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of the oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. And again, we talked about that code language, under the sun, and what that means. Under the sunners are people that don't believe in God, who deny God, deny heaven, deny the afterlife, and basically live under the umbrella of secular humanism. Secularism meaning here and now is all there is. There's nothing that transcends here and now living. So, grab for all the gusto that you can, type of thing. And I'd like to place the theme on these discussions of the next 2 or 3 times we meet together on the theme of death, and that death is something to live for. That it's very healthy to think about death every day, and to contemplate death every day, and to formulate an attitude about death, because you're certainly going to meet him one day, as to what you would like to have been done before you die. How will you approach the day of your death? What's your views on death? And it's a good time, because this is the season. In early November, we just came out of October and Halloween last Saturday, when most cultures celebrate the Day of the Dead or some kind of death motif. whether it's Los Dia, oh, what is it? The Day of the Dead, I forget, something, Los Dia Muertos, something like that. I forgot it. But in any case, go back to chapter 3, what we read last week, and starting in verse 16, Solomon is talking about a particular thing that all of us have from time to time have observed and can acknowledge. And that is sometimes you don't get justice in this world. And everybody will experience some form of injustice. He said, I saw under the sun something else. In the place of judgment, wickedness. In the place of justice, wickedness. In other words, where there should have been justice, there was wickedness. Where there should have been judgment, there was wickedness. And I think most of us can confess a couple of things for sure in this life. One is that we have scarred people, and two, we have been scarred by people. As the old slogan says, hurt people hurt people. And you can't walk around too much in this life without being scarred by somebody. I wonder, the major scars that you have. How have you handled the scars that have been done to you? I know for me, one of probably the greatest hurt comes from people you thought were your friends who betrayed you. Have you ever been betrayed? Is that something that stings you particularly? I mean, when the trust bond is broken, that's a big deal for me. But the unsavory part of what I do for a living is having to look at what people do to each other. And we do terrible things to each other. We do deplorable things to each other. And the life experience of most human beings is that we either experience or witness things like this being done in our world. And that's why we have a propensity as human beings to form covenants. Because when we form a covenant or a contract or a compact or an agreement, basically it's about how we're going to live in a barbaric world. How are we going to live, since we cannot tolerate lawlessness, we cannot tolerate chaos, we will strive towards some kind of control, some kind of order. And so we tend to form covenants or compacts that bring some order. If you don't have order in terms of some kind of rule of law, then social Darwinism takes over, and in that case, only the strong survive. Anybody stronger than you can take whatever it is that you have. Thomas Sowell once said, each new generation born is in effect an invasion of civilization by little barbarians who must be civilized before it's too late. And even though we have systems in place, these same laws, these same institutions are inevitably, they're going to break down. They're going to fail us. And all of the policies that we implement and the procedures that we implement will at best be flawed. We cannot, as broken people, as flawed people ourselves, bring about anything that's other than flawed. And we bring about things for all kinds of ulterior motives, even if at the outset they look good. We could be very altruistic, and yet our motives are tainted by self-intentions, by over-exercise of our authority, by the abuse of power, the love of money. The Bible doesn't say that money is the root of all evil, but that the love of money, the love of wealth, is the root of all evil. Now, does any of us really believe that all of the criminals are actually in jail? No. In fact, the majority of criminals, as I see it, occupy the House of Senate, the seats in the House of Congress and in the Senate, And some of the major culprits in our history have occupied the Oval Office. So there are innocent people in jail, and there are crooks that are scot-free. And we all say that we believe in justice, don't we? I want justice, and you want justice, and we want justice to prevail. But seriously, we have a love-hate relationship with justice, because when someone sins against us, when someone acts criminally against us, when somebody causes us loss, when someone takes something from us, does us dirty, steals our car, we want it back. Justice is bringing things back to equilibrium. It's taking care of the loss that we have caused. And you breach good faith with me, I want justice. You steal from me, I want justice. I want payback. And we all want justice, except when we're the ones that, for good reasons, we're the ones that stole. We're the ones that ripped somebody off. We're the ones that caused somebody to suffer loss. So it's a double-edged sword that's very painful when it comes to justice. We love it when it concerns the other guy. We hate it when it is applied to us. So chapter 3:16 seems to be saying that because all of us are self-centered, there can be no true, impartial, ultimate form of fairness and justice. It's true even in our American system of justice, which some say is far and away one of the best that's ever been. But the fact remains that in the history of the world, human beings and human systems have had less to do with guilt or innocence and more to do with wealth and the skill of the orator advocating for his client. Solomon made the same observations in these words. He said, in the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. Sometimes it isn't a question of whether or not we have enough policemen, but who polices the policemen, and who governs the governors, and who watches over and restrains those who are over us in terms of civil authority. And Thomas Jefferson, man, he hit it right. He said this. He said, when governments fear the people, then there's liberty. When people fear the government, then there's tyranny. So in this life, anyone who loves justice and anyone who wants to see those who are wicked dealt with justly and rightly, those people are inevitably going to be frustrated and disappointed, because the system of justice that we have will from time to time break down and stop functioning as it was meant to function. And so Solomon takes comfort in verse 17 of chapter 3. He says, I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked. We may escape justice here. Someone may get off here. But ultimately, there is someone everyone has to give account to. And Solomon is saying, ultimately, everyone will be brought into judgment. God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked. For there will be a time for every activity and a time to judge every deed. And that day is coming for those who believe in God, for those who believe in heaven, and therefore they're under heaven instead of just merely under the sun. For those people, they at least have the comfort of that thought, that you may burn me and you may get away with it, but one day you'll pay. And so Solomon echoes back to the beginning of chapter 3, verse 1, where he says, there's a time for every season, there's a time and a season for everything. And basically what he's saying is time has a ripening effect. There's a ripe time. When he says right time, there's a ripe time for everything. And when the time is ripe, then justice will prevail. And those who don't believe in God, you have to admit, have no such solace, and they're left seething in their anger and meaning of injustices in this world. And they can become bitter, and they can become resentful. They're left to stew in their juices and perhaps contemplate or dream of or fantasize or even act out revengefully. and with hatred, which ultimately turns into lawlessness and turns more people into cynics than most. Thomas Jefferson said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice will not sleep forever." There's a time of reckoning that will come then. And under the Sunners may not have the comfort of knowing that, or they may not be comforted by knowing that because they want it now. But for those of us who are law-abiding citizens and who are enjoying our food, enjoying our wife, enjoying our work, and reaching for contentment, ataraxia, in this world, one of the ways we achieve that is by trusting in the fact that even if we do not get justice by human representation, there is an advocate, a divine advocate, who will bring justice to those people that have hurt us. And the sobering idea is that he will also bring justice to our deeds that we've done. So, perfect laws? No. Perfect authorities? No. How do you deal with that? How have you dealt with injustice in your life? I believe everything I just said. But I'm a human being. I'm a man. And if someone does me dirty or does a loved one dirty, I want justice, and I'll stew in those juices for a while before I come to grips once again with the fact that I'm not doing anybody any good doing that. What can I do that will bring me peace in a world where someone has gotten away without being brought to justice? Believing that the ultimate judge will bring ultimate justice to every person that's done evil to anyone in this world. And that form of justice will be far more severe than anything I could do. That can bring me peace. Leave it in God's hands, man. Just leave it alone. Leave it in God's hands. And remember this. Remember how lenient he's been toward you. In fact, it's not so much why other people get away with it. Why have you gotten away with sinning against a righteous and loving God? If you believe in God. Now, in verse 18 of chapter 3, we talked a little about this last week. I wanted to develop this a little bit further because it's so doggone hard. He says, "I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that left to themselves are like animals." Now, he doesn't say we are animals, but that all human beings, when separated from the fear of God, when separated from being law-abiding citizens, they end up acting like animals. And that's what I meant when I talked about Darwinian socialism. It's the same thing. We form packs, and whoever is the strongest gets everything the weakest have. Jesus had a brother named James. And he later on became an apostle. And he wrote a book. And in the book, I think chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken, he asked the question, where comes wars and rumors of wars? What is the seedbed of all conflict? And the seedbed of all conflict stems from injustice, from the fact that we ask for justice, but we don't get it. And so we try to get it ourselves. And when that happens, without any law and without any agreement as to a standard of conduct, and we become vigilantes and we become vengeful, sooner or later, that spirit takes over us, and not only do we seek revenge, but more. we end up not only bringing people that hurt us into justice, but we bring over justice to them, making us perpetrators against them, so that their children feel just when they grow up, bringing vengeance upon us for what we did in our over judgment. You get that? I can understand where evolutionary theorists came from when they said that they draw the conclusion we come from animals, because sometimes when we give ourselves over to our base nature, our fallen, crooked humanity ends up descending to the place where we no longer even resemble the image bearers of God. But like mere animals, we conduct ourselves in beastly and ghastly ways, living according to tooth and nail as it is. Stephen Link wrote that saying some people act like animals is like saying that some redwoods act like trees. We didn't come from animals, we came from God. This is what the biblical worldview believes, that we came from God, that God embedded in us this dignity, this value, and great worth that comes from the fact that He created us to reflect His image and bear His image on the earth, that we're made to rule over the animals and steward creation so that it's fruitful as it can be, and that the earth was supposed to be a better place because He put us here. But we became flawed and broken and fallen. And in our fallen condition, we often default to a base nature that's unbridled in its appetites, its desires. We look like animals, we act like animals. And in fact, calling some men animals is a generous upgrade from what they should be called. Because no animal do anything close to the kinds of things that wicked human beings seem to be capable of doing to each other, as sadly some of you well know. Now, one of my favorite movies is The Island of Dr. Moreau, and doctor that did vivisection and other experiments blending animals and human beings together to make some form of a higher creature than either one of them are individually. Then put them under law to keep their animal natures in restraint. But it began to break down. Ultimately, the utopia he thought became a dystopia. And basically, all of these creatures he created returned to a Darwinian sociology. They developed a very animalistic hierarchy in which the strong survived and the weak were prey. That's what happens to us when we are people that do not abide by the laws. Now, when we say laws, basically, and C.S. Lewis argued this well when he said the laws of God don't have to be written on stone, they don't have to be written on paper, because they're written on our hearts. He carved them there on our hearts. There's a basic instinct in our hearts that understands right from wrong. There's this cannibal that became a Christian. He came out of a cannibal tribe. That's all they knew. Their world was cannibalism. They ate and they were eaten. Once this guy became a Christian and got educated, he was able to communicate that even though he was raised in a culture and basically in a microcosm world, a mini world, if you will, of barbarity, cannibalism, and the like, he always knew in his heart that it was wrong to eat other people. And when they asked him how do you know that, he said, because I knew I didn't want them eating me. And so I had a twinge of guilt when we ate them. And so those laws are written on our hearts. Some people call those laws conscience. Some people call them a moral code. But however they are, or whatever you think they are, have you ever stopped to consider what kind of code you lived under and why? Why are we moral at all? Why aren't we just animals with no tension? What causes us to want to reach higher and live higher? What gives us the urge to do good, to be altruistic or compassionate? What gives us the innate ability to look at something and say, that's wrong. I need to stop that. Where do they come from? If they do not come from man, then where do they come from? If they came from men, then we're only as safe as the next president or prime minister or what have you. Because if he comes with a dictatorial ambition and takes over, sooner or later the laws are going to change to reflect what he wants done. What's to save us from that? What kind of laws do we put in place to save us from the ambition of powerful men who want to be like the top dog and treat the rest of us as prey or like cattle? Where do those come from? What higher authority is there? Or not? How do you explain that? There's more and more lawlessness is ruling the land. Every day we're reading about more and more atrocities. When Islam is in power, everybody's prey. And the most cruel, wicked things are done in the name of Islam. Sometimes the worst cruel things were done in the name of Christianity when it got blended with the secular powers of the state. And men became corrupt because power corrupts, and ultimate power, absolute power, corrupts absolutely. How do you deal with power when authority is given to you and power is given to you? How do you react? How do you treat those under you? Are you a harsh dictator? Are you amenable? Are you humble in the exercise of your authority? And in a sense, how are you dealing with the sense of losses that you've incurred in this life because of injustice, the evil of other people? So someone once said that holding forgiveness from someone or unforgiveness in order to punish them is like eating rat poison in order to get rid of rats. It will ultimately destroy you. Oppression that does not get brought to justice can ultimately destroy you, or you being destroyed by the anger that you have not reconciled in your heart because of uncivility, because of criminal activity, because of cruelty. How is that affecting you? How is it affecting your relationship with your wife and your children? How has that changed your personality for the worse? And Solomon said, basically, the key to being able to enjoy your food, living in the moment, being at peace, being completely content, has to do with, at least in part, how you deal with inevitable injustice that is not rectified. This is the Pipepastor coming to you from Fresno once again. And until we meet again, leave your comments below. Let's have a discussion. Sláinte.